Joining me first, Mason Tvert, Director of Communications for the Marijuana Policy Project, the biggest source of strategy and cash in the big win in Alaska last night, and the organization we can all thank for what is really a slogan now, regulate marijuana like alcohol. Mason, thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
You've been a part of this movement since your early 20s. How does it feel to see it succeed?
Well, you know, it's really something that we knew had to happen. It was just a question of how quickly it'll happen. It's really easy to argue this issue when you have all the facts on your side, and that's the case here. You know, we know marijuana is a less harmful substance than alcohol. We know that prohibition has utterly failed and has been ineffective and wasteful. And we know most Americans think it's time to regulate marijuana and treat it like alcohol.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's obviously been this massive change in attitudes, and a big driver has been your work, this idea of regulating pot like alcohol. Why do you think that message in particular resonates with people?
Well, you know, just about everyone recognizes that alcohol prohibition failed miserably, and just about everyone agrees that adults should be able to use alcohol responsibly. You know, they shouldn't be punished just for having a beer or a glass of wine or a cocktail after work. And so by pointing out that marijuana is actually less harmful than alcohol, it's less toxic, less addictive, less likely to contribute to violence, and pointing out that prohibition of marijuana is on par with alcohol prohibition, it really manages to get voters thinking.
So here's one thing that I'm confused about regarding that slogan. So everyone accepts it as an argument for softer laws against marijuana, but you could also interpret it as an argument for tougher laws on alcohol. Now that your vision is becoming a reality, I'm curious, how do you feel about the state of alcohol regulations?
Well, you know, alcohol is something that's been a huge part of our culture for years. I don't see anyone wanting to go back toward an era of prohibition. It's widely recognized that was.
I mean, is it a viable model as it currently exists for marijuana? I mean, that's the slogan, right? So is it?
Well, here's the thing. You know, these are different substances, and they need to be treated differently. That's why it's regulate marijuana like alcohol, not regulate marijuana identically to alcohol. You know, even every state treats alcohol differently. Some have, government-run stores to sell liquor. Some allow liquor sales on Sundays. Some don't. It really comes down to what the communities want, and it comes down to what works best for the state. And that's what's going to happen with marijuana. There's no reason why we can't handle this substance in a similar way.
All right. Well, in a similar vein, we've got a society that celebrates drinking and, God love us, debauchery. You've experienced a bit of this firsthand. You've spoken openly about an alcohol poisoning ER trip you took when you were in college, and you basically got a slap on the wrist, right? How would you feel about a society that accepted excesses of marijuana with the same good cheer?
Well, so here's the important thing is that we know the harms associated with alcohol are exceptionally greater than with marijuana. The public health costs are more than 8 times greater. Even our federal government acknowledges that it's less addictive. It's really just not remotely the public health problem that we see with things like alcohol. So why would we not want to let adults make the choice to use a less harmful substance if that's what they'd prefer?
But what I'm asking, as we move toward greater and greater acceptance, what I'm asking is, how do you feel? Are you okay with a society where marijuana is as exuberantly used as alcohol is?
Well, I don't think that the problems we see associated with the exuberant use of alcohol are associated with the exuberant use of marijuana, but the goal here is not to promote marijuana as this substance everyone should use. It's simply to say that, you know, as a society, we recognize that adults would like to have a drink or use some marijuana after work to relax or to socialize with friends, and there's nothing wrong with that if they're doing it responsibly. We need to focus on educating people about the potential problems that could arise with any of these substances, and really not punish those adults who are doing this in a responsible fashion.
We should pause to explain something important about these new marijuana laws. They're supposed to regulate marijuana like alcohol, but in fact, at the moment, they are much stricter. The taxes are higher, the fines are higher for violations, the restrictions on advertising and market consolidation are huge. So the big fear from critics is that we're bottle feeding a vampire, essentially, right? That marijuana will be tightly regulated now, but grow bigger and break those bonds and later start, I don't know, sucking blood. I guess you disagree, but walk me through why that's not a legitimate fear.
That's on par with saying allowing marriage equality is going to result in incest and bestiality. I mean, there's no reason to expect that all of a sudden the public and government officials are going to want to completely remove all restrictions from marijuana.
Not suddenly.
Right now, we're actually
take a long view. I mean, what's the long?
Well,
view
yeah,
of
but
this?
in the long view, we have laws that are in place, and there's not much more you can ask. I mean, what's the alternative to have absolutely no control over marijuana, to let it be sold by illegal dealers on the streets, to not have packaging and labeling, or do we want it to be controlled? And when we control a product, that entails regulations that the community wants.
So why not just decriminalize it rather than give it over to big business?
Well, you keep saying big business, but all we're doing is taking it out of the business of criminals and cartels and putting it into the hands of legitimate, licensed businesses like we have with alcohol. I think everyone agrees that that was a good move with alcohol. If you simply make it legal to possess, you're not in any way controlling the production and distribution of the substance. It's not being tested, packaged, labeled. We don't know who's selling it, where, when, or to whom. Why would we not want authorities to control that?
So then just point blank, I want to be totally clear. You're okay, fully okay, no worries at all about a society where marijuana is marketed full scale and everywhere, just like sugar cereal, good old American beer.
No, that is absolutely not what I'm saying at all.
Okay.
I'm saying that I think that we need to have a reasonable system that allows adults to use marijuana
So you are
responsibly if
concerned,
they
in
would
other words.
like.
You don't want to see mass marketing
Well, I don't
on
think
that
that.
scale.
Okay, let me just explain what I'm saying is that no, we should not be having mass marketing. We should be having reasonable restrictions. For example, in Colorado, what we have are restrictions on the marketing of marijuana. It can only be done in publications where the vast majority of the readership is an adult. It cannot be done on television. We don't have sign twirlers on the streets. And what's interesting is that the people who have supported those restrictions are the businesses themselves, because they want to be responsible. They want this to last. They don't want it to blow up into something that's demonized like alcohol.
So edibles are the other great source of pot anxiety these days. They look like regular candy, they look like food, and they're very potent. People don't know how to dose themselves, plus kids can get into it. As the market matures, and I know Colorado is thinking a lot about this right now, how worried are you about edibles as a public health problem?
Well, number one, we got to keep it in perspective. We're talking about a product that you can't overdose and die on. We're talking about a product where generally what happens is you would have a very unpleasant experience. What we need to be doing is focusing on educating consumers, like you said, about what a proper dosage is, how long they need to wait after they consume it. And we've launched a campaign called Consume Responsibly, and industry organizations have launched campaigns to do that. And it's going to take that type of education to get the point across. But, making these products illegal, not having them packaged, not having them labeled, not knowing how potent they are, that accomplishes nothing. So,
let me ask
when it comes to
let me ask the edibles question in just a slightly different way. So one of my favorite scenes from the Mason Tvert highlight reel is when you challenge Colorado Governor Hickenlooper to a drug-off, essentially, right? Every sip of beer he has, he was a brewer. Every sip he has, you would take a puff of weed, and the last man standing wins, right? The point is that marijuana is safer than alcohol, and therefore you're going to win. Do you think you could take the same bet if for every drink he had, you had to take a bite of a pot brownie, an edible, a truffle, something like that?
I think that we would need to keep things fair. If he wanted to take a sip of grain alcohol for every bite off of a marijuana edible, then I'm pretty confident that he would die, which is what it says on the bottle of that product. But, the fact is that I would have a very unpleasant experience, but in the end, I would be relatively fine. I might have an increased heart rate. I might feel uncomfortable. He would have his lower brain functioning cease. He would stop breathing and he would pass away.
Right. Okay. You're right. All right. Fair point. Fair point. All right. So besides edibles, vaporizers, the little highlighter pens that deliver a dose of superheated weed, they're all the rage now. Do you think those have a place in the future of this industry, or will they be curtailed in the way some tobacco innovations were curtailed?
I think that it's going to be something that we monitor. I mean, right now, obviously, it's seen as a it's a safer alternative to smoking. People don't like ingesting smoke. Just like with cigarettes, we know that using a vaporized form of tobacco or nicotine is going to be less harmful. There's still a question as to what the effects of some of the chemicals that might be used in certain products, these types of vaporizers, might have. Right now, we have not seen that it's any sort of significant problem, but like with any product on the market, these are things that are going to be looked at very carefully, and we're going to continue to see innovation because there's a huge demand for consuming marijuana by adults, and there's a demand for doing it without smoking, and that's where edibles and vaporizers come in.
All right, Mason, final question. Big marijuana, love it, hate it, fear it, think it's bogus, all of the above. Where do you fall?
I fall in it being just another legal product that is, treated like every other. I mean, we have big beer companies, we have small beer companies, we have big, grocery stores, we have local grocery stores. If you don't like the idea of there being large businesses that produce and sell marijuana, generally that means you don't like the idea of capitalism, and that's certainly
Mason,
an argument to have.
I got to cut you off there. I really appreciate you being a sport about all this and coming on. Congratulations again on the big victories last night, and we'll be following you into 2016.